This is a tutorial video on how to program a Handler Model 210 DCU two-stage digital curing unit. As with all equipment, when you receive it, you should inspect it carefully and you should read the instructions thoroughly. When you take the 2010 out of its box, place it on a solid work surface that's capable of holding it, and you can plug the cord set into a 110 outlet, standard 110 outlet. It requires 13 amps, so it should have its own dedicated source. Once you do that, you would program it by first of all activating it and flipping the green lighted rocker switch. Now each 2010 that comes out of Handler's factory is pre-programmed to the first temperature setting on your vertical axis, capital T1, of 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 74.1 degrees Celsius. That's a standard curing temperature for most acrylics. The second temperature setting on the vertical axis, T2, is programmed at 210 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the maximum temperature and which will provide you with a rolling boil to allow you to boil out wax. If you arrow down and hit the mode button, you're now on the horizontal axis where you have five time settings. It's pre-programmed. T0 is your start time. It's pre-programmed at 10 seconds, which is your countdown time to start the unit. Your second time setting, lowercase t1, is your ramp-up time from the temperature of the water that you fill it with to your first temperature setting of 165 degrees. Your third time, T2, is set for 120 minutes. That's your curing time. Your fourth time, T3, is the time it takes to go from 165 degrees Fahrenheit to 210 degrees Fahrenheit for your rolling boil. And then your final time setting, lowercase t4, is a 30-minute boil out. Once you start the unit by pressing start, the unit will cycle through each of those time settings and each of those temperature settings. Once it is done, once it has cycled through all of those time and temperature settings, the unit will flash and beep, indicating that it has completed its cycle, and at that point you press stop. If you want to change your time or temperature settings, it's very simple. For example, if you don't want the machine to start in 10 seconds, but you want it to start an hour later, you simply press the set button and arrow up to adjust your time up. When it reaches 60 minutes or 1 hour, you'll stop, get to the correct setting, and hit set again. Now, once you hit start, the unit's going to count down from 60 minutes and start. You can program the machine, you can program any of the time settings all the way up to 999 minutes. So if you wanted to leave your lab at 5 o'clock and have the machine programmed to start at 8 o'clock the next morning, you would simply do the math and have it start at 8 o'clock in the morning. Once you hit start, it's just going to count down the time. You can do that for any setting. For example, we have it set to ramp up 60 minutes to go from ambient temperature water to 165. The unit will heat up 1.7 degrees for every minute. So if you wanted your first temperature to go right to boil, you would have to do the math and say, okay, how long is it going to take 70 degree water to go to 210? You would subtract 70 from 210, that's 140, and divide by 1.7, and then program this time setting accordingly. You can program each of your time settings to where you want it to be, and you can program each of your temperature settings to where you want it to be. There are two things you can't do. You can't go from a higher temperature at your first temp setting to a lower temperature. The machine will not allow you to do that. You can go from a lower temperature to a higher temperature, but you cannot go from a higher temperature to a lower temperature. If you want it to be the same temperature, if you just want to boil, you do have to program both time settings to boil. If you just want to cure at 165 degrees or any other temperature, you would do the same thing. You would program the machine to cure at 165 for both temperature settings. And you would have it cycle through the times that you need it to cycle through. So you can't, if you want to cure, you have to set both temperatures to cure. You can't just set temperature 1 and not set temperature 2. Once you've programmed the unit and you hit start, the unit's going to cycle through, and it has to go through its entire cycle. If you want to stop the unit in the middle of the cycle, you can simply by hitting the start-stop button.